The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. You're listening to a Truly Human Leadership podcast refresher, where we reshare insight from podcast episodes from the past. For more than 40 years, Lynne Twist has been inspirational through her work to alleviate poverty and hunger in the world, and her passionate support of social justice and environmental issues. Her book, The Soul of Money, Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Life, and her Soul of Money Institute help coach others in the arenas of fundraising with integrity, conscious philanthropy, strategic visioning, and to just help people have a healthy relationship with money. You can find out more about Lynne and her various projects at lynnetwist.com. But for now, here is Lynne Twist.
I've learned a lot about money through fundraising, through working with I worked on hunger and poverty for many years, so I'm very familiar with the pain and oppression of poverty. Mm-hmm. And in working on hunger, you need to raise money to do that work, so I ended up doing a lot of fundraising with extremely wealthy people, so kind of two ends of the spectrum, and I have just seen how kind of nutty we are around money, no matter whether you have piles of it or you're trying to make ends meet or you wish you had more. Mm-hmm. So it's really through working on global issues that I discovered a lot of the hurt and wounding and baggage and breakdowns are really around our distorted and really pathological relationship with money that causes a lot of the problems I was working on, you could say. Mm-hmm. And then indigenous people, I mean, they didn't even know money existed. They don't need it. They're prosperous. They're living in the Amazon. Everything's right there. And they just think it's completely weird how completely nutty we are about money. And that's kind of what has given me a whole other lens on it. So my work as a pro-activist, I call myself a pro-activist, like an activist for, not against anything, has led me to realize that there's just a lot of confusion around the consumer, commercial, society that we live in that drives behaviors that are inconsistent with our humanity. Accumulating all kinds of stuff we don't need, wanting things we don't need, doing almost anything to get more money, even things that will hurt other people, or damage the environment or destroy the very fabric of life.
Tell me what you're feeling about what you've experienced these past couple days.
Well, I'm feeling really grateful that Bob brought me here and introduced me to the communication skills training, and very deeply impressed and inspired by the program, by what I'm learning, and what I see is at the heart of what is being taught. It maps beautifully and brilliantly on the work that I do, and given that I work on giant global issues, so much of the challenges we face today as a global family with climate change, which is a huge area of work, an environmental crisis that I'm involved in, the social justice crisis, the oppression of literally billions of people on this planet, the work to end world hunger, and the work to really inspire and enable people to find their spiritual root, will be served by this program, really served by it. So I feel that the methodology, the depth of detail and rigor with which David has put together this program is just, it's spectacular, it's stupendous, it's breathtaking. It's also very moving to me to help me recalibrate my own life and my own work, and look very deeply into my own capacity for listening and for having the people that I work with and the people that I'm trying to serve be heard. I would say that it's just clear to me that racism, poverty, the horrendous oppression of women and girls, in many ways the most powerful thing we can do for women who've been raped in the Congo over and over and over again is listen to their stories, deeply listen to their stories. And that's a lot of what the Nobel Women Peace Prize laureates do. They are spectacular listeners, and they listen so deeply that a woman, by telling the story of being gang raped by the military over and over and over again in the Congo, by telling that story to someone who can really, really hear it, they start healing just out of the telling. That's an example. Mm-hmm. Indigenous people of the Amazon, 500 years of being discounted and not even counted in the census, and protecting the rainforest for the future of life, but not even being treated like human beings. When they have a chance to communicate, all they want is for people to listen to them. And working with Indigenous people, we've listened for hours and hours and hours and hours because they have never been heard before. So I can see in both the global work that I do and social justice work that I do, you can say that Ferguson, for example, the eruption around Ferguson, you could say is a result of people not being heard, not being received, their communication not being listened to deeply, and a million solutions coming at them, but people not really being heard. You could say that that's what's going on in the Middle East. So this beautiful program has power for the peace movement, for waking us up to the responsibilities we have for the natural world. It has power for the great issues of our time, as well as absolute primary application in parenting, in marriages, in the workplace, in resolving the deep longing and yearning in people's heart to be loved, to be seen, to be heard, to be accepted, to be really gotten. And I'm really impressed and so touched that I have been given this opportunity, and I'm on the team now. I haven't finished quite yet. We have another half day left to spread this program around the world and to find ways to make what has been taught to me today available to other people.
And what did you learn something that you didn't know, or was it just a sort of a refresher for you?
I learned things I didn't know. Things that I did know were affirmed, but in a very deep way. The power of the model, I'll say, reveals dimensions and nuances that I didn't know, that I didn't see. There's I'll say a rigor to it and a revelation in this program that I think has been really powerful for me. And things that we kind of know but we don't really practice got firmly implanted in my soul. And then things that I didn't know, that I was blind to, that I was completely clueless about, got revealed to me in a way that I will be a much more effective, kinder, more loving human being. I don't feel, the other thing is I don't feel fixed or corrected, which is so great. I have experienced a transformation. I make a distinction between transformation and change in the programs that I work on. And I would call this a transformation, and out of transformation, really profound change can flow. So I think it's just spectacular. I'm really, really thrilled that I came, and just delighted and dying and completely committed to being Bob's partner and getting this around the world. I met Bob in a business conference setting where I was a speaker and he was a speaker, and I spoke. And then he, after I spoke, he came up to me and was very, very generous and kind. And you know the way he is. He's so loving and so affirming. And after connecting with him that way, I decided not to, I was flying out the next morning, I decided to change my plane a little bit later so I could hear his talk. And he did, one of his brilliant talks with statistics, charts, and graphs, but what really reached me was how much he loves his people, his companies, the opportunity to serve them. And coming here, being at the headquarters, and now going to Green Bay, which I'm going to do, and really talk to people who are, I think, machinists and people who run these giant manufacturing centers. I just know that he wants me to go and talk to them, shows me that this is here all the way down. In other words, there's nothing hidden. It's the real deal. It's just awesome, and I'm so moved by that, and that this program, this enlightened, revelatory work is coming out of industrial America, places where, people are sort of making, I'm not even totally clear what Barry-Wehmiller does, besides produce remarkable human beings, or give remarkable human beings the opportunity to be what they are. So I just love this company. I can see that there's the fabric, the warp and weave of what is happening here is truly human, truly respectful. And it just, last night I was in tears over it. It moves me to my core. This is a very, very special company, and I'd like to say someday that it was the company that inaugurated this way of working, and it's not special anymore because all companies are this way, and I know that's what he wants, and I like to help him get there.
So tell me this then. So it's what we want to. We all spend a lot of time trying to share what we've learned and what we know is wonderful with the world. There must have been a point in your career and your work where you jumped to the bigger stage. What was that? What do you think was critical to your work being noticed by more people? I mean, Huffington Post, Oprah's radio network. I mean, what were the things that allowed you to be visible, become more visible?
Well, I didn't seek that, so it's a little different for me. I'm a servant. I'm a servant leader now, but I became deeply. I live what I call a committed life. And my commitment to end world hunger really came from my interactions with Buckminster Fuller, one of my greatest teachers, and Werner Erhard, who founded what was EST and now is called the Landmark work. And the Landmark training was significant, profound for me. And after I took that program, it was called EST at the time, and worked with Bucky Fuller, and Werner Erhard and Buckminster Fuller came together, and they, out of their conversations in many ways, this organization called the Hunger Project was born, a commitment to end world hunger. I was there. I was present. I was privileged to be at this moment in history where two remarkable human beings realized that hunger was not inevitable and that it could be ended. And the whole work of the Hunger Project really brought me to the world stage. I had 3 little kids. I wasn't even thinking of working. I was, a teacher at the time. But I became so profoundly committed to ending world hunger that I ended up raising my whole family in the context of the end of hunger. And the Hunger Project's very much like this course in a way, because the Hunger Project doesn't seek to feed. It's not about there's a billion hungry people and we all need to feed them. No. It's that there's a billion remarkable, whole and complete human beings standing on the front lines of the end of hunger. And we have the privilege of joining them in accomplishing that task. So it's all about empowering people. It's all about seeing who people are. People living in conditions of hunger and poverty are whole and complete people. They're not poor. Their conditions are poor, but they're not. In fact, they're some of the most remarkable people I've ever known. The same thing with the rainforest work. the elder who met with us the very first time we came there said, if you're coming to help us, don't waste your time. If you're coming because you know your liberation is bound up with ours, then let's work together. So the very ethic that's at the center of the communication skills training, which is that if you are there for people, if you listen for their greatness, for their goodness, for their beauty, they will resolve their own problems in the presence of your love and commitment. So that is what my life has been about. And so when you take on big issues like ending world hunger or preserving the Amazon rainforest or empowering women and girls and giving them a voice, you end up becoming visible. You end up on the global stage. You end up working. I worked very closely with Mother Teresa. I worked with Desmond Tutu, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Jane Goodall. You end up working with some of the great people on earth, not because I sought to do that, but because I live what I call a committed life, and my commitments wake me up in the morning, tell me where to go, what to wear, and it's my commitment that has me here. When I met Bob and experienced the profound commitment that he has, how much he loves, it spoke so deeply to me that we knew that we met for a reason. You know, it was kind of like, it's not an accident. Now, maybe everybody says that about Bob, and in my case, I can say it absolutely authentically, that we're meant to do something together. And we like each other, but it's not so much that. It's that I see in him a commitment as deep as the one I have. And that's not only affirming, but it lights me up. So I know that we can work together with a kind of an integrity and depth and love and beauty and passion that really makes things work. So I can't remember what you asked me.
No,
but
you've answered it.
Have I?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't seek to be at all famous. I don't even want that. But if it will serve what I'm committed to, then I will give myself to that as well.
Lynne came into our circle at Barry-Wehmiller after meeting our CEO Bob Chapman at a conference, an encounter that was very important for both of our organizations and has led to a very fruitful relationship. Lynne has visited us in St. Louis, speaking to our team members on one occasion, which is the basis for this week's podcast. You'll hear Lynne talk a little more about her personal journey, how she came to her work fighting hunger in the world, how she views leadership, and how business and activism, or proactivism as she calls it, should work in harmony for the good of the world.
I had made a commitment in front of all the people at the conference where I met Bob. I stood in front of them after that. You know, I had a standing ovation. I made a commitment that I would defang business in the social sector, in the activist sector, for example. We may be strange bedfellows, but we need to do everything together. And that I would make sure that the business sector understood the passion of the activist. It doesn't need to be about making business wrong. It can be about finding the best in the passion of the activist and the finest of the effectiveness and the vision and the power of business, and putting that together for the problems that we face that are way too big for us to try to solve by pointing fingers at each other or doing it alone. And that commitment that I made that day, it was that day when I met Bob. All this stuff happened on the day I met Bob. You know, everybody probably has the day they met Bob Chapman. And since then, we've created the business engagement team at the Pachamama Alliance. We're delivering our programs inside of companies. So our Awakening Dreamers Symposium gives people a global citizen consciousness so that they will be doing business in a way that's consistent with the vision of the global initiatives around the world. We've had the privilege of having a lot of business people go down to the Amazon with us and get completely out of the box, sitting in the rainforest, thinking about how they're going to run their business when they go home. So we've been doing a lot of CEO trips. Sarah and I just finished one where, you know, One of the multi-billion-dollar companies in Salt Lake City is going to bring more people to the Amazon, more of their executives, to get them out of the box and having them really recognize how precious, how the economy is a subset of the ecology. I was given the opportunity to speak on Wall Street, to do a TED Wall Street talk, and I was scared to death, Wall Street, and I said what was sort of incomprehensible to people, but I think it made a difference. I've said that the financial crisis is an ecological crisis, and that the ecological crisis really began in 1987 when we crossed the One Earth line. That is, we're using more resources than the Earth can regenerate. So we're now in ecological debt, ecological overshoot, it's called by scientists. Since 1987, we're now up to 50% more than the Earth can regenerate, the human community. That is ecological debt that we can never pay back. And ecological economists in 1987 predicted an economic crisis of huge proportions in 2007. Did you notice what happened in 2007? That the economy would be an accurate reflection of the ecological crisis, and we would go into an economic crisis. And we haven't come out of it really. I mean, Barry-Wehmiller probably has, but most of the solution for the economic crisis is borrowing, getting deeper in debt, which is a reflection of the ecological crisis. So if you can think about it this way, the economy is a subset of the ecology. It's not the other way around. The ecology is not here to serve the economy. The economy is a subset of the ecology. And until we learn to live within our ecological means, we will continue to be in economic debt. I said that on Wall Street. Can you imagine? So, I mean, that had not occurred to anyone there. All the instruments and all that derivatives and all that stuff and the corruption, sure, that has a huge amount to do with it, but that exacerbated something that was already there, I say. This message that I'm saying right now, plus the partnering with what I call the pro-activist community, rather than activist community. Pro-activists are people who are for something rather than against, for a vision of a sustainable, just, fulfilling, spiritually caring world rather than against anything. And they see what's in the way and they're willing to address what's in the way, but they're not against, they're for. Linking the pro-activist passion with the effectiveness and the rigor and the excellence of business. There's nothing like business in the world. Governments are so far afield from business. Nothing as effective as business. How can we take all of that and put it to work with the passion that we all feel for the world? And I also would just say the structures and systems that we're all caught in, like quarterly profits and earnings, all of that, we just need to address ourselves to it. We're caught in structures that don't serve the real longing we have to do business in the way it's meant to be done. And that's what conscious capitalism, social venture network, Business Alliance for the Future, B Corp, all of these organizations now are addressing what are the structures and systems that we need to rethink that will have business be everything it wants to be now, except we're caught in the rigidity of an old system that's no longer appropriate. So I say the work is to, together, hospice the death of the old structures and systems that no longer serve us. They're unsustainable, which means they're dying, and they are falling apart, while we midwife the new structures and systems that are consistent with the sustainable, just, fulfilling, caring future we all want. And hospicing and midwifing are acts of witnessing and love. Things that are dying die faster when they're hospice, and they die with respect. The structures and systems that no longer serve us, we need to respect them. They gave us everything we've got now, but they're no longer appropriate. While we midwife new structures and systems that we see now are appropriate for the kind of world we want, eventually they'll become obsolete. But with respect and love, working together to have it all turn out the way it needs to be. And I've learned a whole lot from business. And I'm very, very grateful to have that opportunity to work together with Barry-Wehmiller and other companies now in a way that I never dreamed possible. The way I look at my own leadership is maybe a little different maybe than one would expect. I realize that somewhere along the way in my life, I have been given opportunities, privileges, you could say, circumstances that pushed me into leadership positions I was never ready for. Way before I was ready for them, way before I chose them. That may be the case for some of you. Often leadership comes at you and is required of you before you're ready to express it. And in my case, that has been the situation every step in the way. I've always been in situations where I'm over my head, always. I don't remember being in a situation where I felt competent and ready to accomplish what was being asked of me. And I ask you if that is also true for you, and is that when you became greater, when you were thrown into a situation where you went in over your head. My early days as a young mother with 3 little kids, I had the great opportunity to do a little part-time work with something that called the Hunger Project. And I was a teacher at that time. I was a part-time teacher. My kids were little ones. They needed a lot of attention. My husband was a business guy. He was gone a lot, building a company. And yet I was called to get involved with this budding idea of ending world hunger. Not just relieving the suffering, which is noble and fabulous, not only working on the periphery of the problem, hoping to make it a little bit better for people who are suffering of hunger and poverty, but no, to stand at the heart of the hunger issue, an issue that has plagued humanity for centuries, on a planet where there's plenty of food, actually, to feed the population we even have now, 7 billion people, 3 times over. Yet we would live in a world where 1 billion of us, most of them children under 5, would be hungry all the time, and many of them starve to death. And the people that I had the great fortune of knowing at that time included the great Buckminster Fuller. And Buckminster Fuller made it very clear to the group of people that was formulating this project called the Hunger Project that hunger is not a food issue, it's not a political issue, it's not a kind of geographic issue, it's not a distribution issue. Now, all of those things are involved. It's not about seeds, it's not about water, it's not about fertilizer. It's about integrity. That we would be able to tolerate as a human community, living in a community of life, a family of human beings, where at that time, when there were 4 billion people on Earth, 1 out of every 4 people went to bed hungry every night in a world where there was way more food than we needed, and we were throwing away mountains of food every day. That's an integrity issue, a breakdown in the integrity between us and fellow human beings, a breakdown in our understanding of the responsibility we have to our fellow human beings, a breakdown in the wholeness and oneness of the human family. And that somehow just went right into the heart of my soul. And even though I was way too busy to spend time working on ending world hunger, because I had these 3 little kids and I was teaching school, I became completely captivated by the notion that I could participate in the eradication of world hunger, one of humanity's oldest, seemingly most intractable problems. But Buckminster Fuller and the team of people working with him said, somebody has to take a stand to end this, because we can. And we have accepted it like an inevitable, hopeless tragedy. And that attitude, that mindset that it's hopeless and inevitable, is what stands in the way of addressing it powerfully. So I began to learn about mindsets, about paradigms, about attitudes, about commitment, about will, and about transforming your mindset, transforming your sense of what's possible, rethinking, recalibrating, resourcing, redeveloping your view of the world in a way that you can be effective, potent, and useful. And once you have a shift, once you have an alteration of the way you see the world, once you have a kind of an awakening, things become possible that previously were unimaginable. And the world shows up completely differently. And so when I committed myself, and I actually ended up committing my life to ending world hunger, everything shifted for me. I had a completely different kind of view of the world, and I had a completely different life, and a completely different set of circumstances began to show up. So it's the source of what I call a committed life. I feel like I got the privilege and opportunity as a young woman to shift from doing the best I could, living the life that you kind of thought you were supposed to be living, to living what I call a committed life, where rather than my desires, I was governed and am still governed by my commitments, my highest commitments. My desires are way in the background. My wants are way in the background. I know my needs have been met long ago. So now I'm all about what I'm committed to. And the commitment to end world hunger completely reshaped my experience of the world. I was raised as a Catholic. I was at one point when I was in high school, I thought, I should be a nun. I would be a good nun. I would look really good in that black and white outfit. Because I saw the Nun Story, you know, probably all of you weren't even born when this movie was made. But Audrey Hepburn was the star, and she looked fantastic in that outfit. And after seeing the Nun Story, I was just sure that I should be a nun. And I remember, you know, trying to sort of dress myself up like a nun to see if it would really look as good as it did with her outfit. And, you know, I mean, that's silly, but I did have this almost romantic notion of becoming a nun. And I wasn't so sure, forgive me if you're a Catholic, about the church. I loved the faith, but the church had all these rules, and you couldn't do this, and you couldn't do that, and there were things that I was sort of not so sure about, but I loved the faith. And one of the things I loved most was the example of Mother Teresa. And when I was a young woman thinking about what I was going to do with my life in high school, I just totally admired and adored Mother Teresa. I thought that she's like the perfect human being. Now I think everybody thinks Mother Teresa is pretty cool, but I was completely obsessed with her. And that was one of the reasons I thought being a nun would be cool. But after a while, you know, I was pretty popular. I was a cheerleader. I was homecoming queen. It didn't kind of fit to be a nun. And I had boyfriends, and the captain of the football team was my boyfriend. So it didn't all come together so well. But later in my life, you know, I let go of that dream for myself, and I got married and started having kids and was a teacher. And then this thing called the Hunger Project happened to me, and I got completely and totally devoted, dedicated. I actually became, you could say, obsessed. Some people might say obsessed. I would call it completely devoted to ending world hunger. And that high mission, that possibility, that vision that was so much greater than my life starring me, put my life starring me in the background and my service in the foreground. And when you do that, when you bow to the deep longing to serve that's in your life, everything becomes magical. And I'm not kidding. It seems like a sacrifice, but for me, it was the key to a kingdom I never even knew existed. And out of being committed to ending world hunger, I ended up traveling all over this planet. I ended up in India, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Namibia, Guinea-Bissau, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Ecuador, Peru, Mexico, you name it, I've worked there. I've had my hands in the dirt with people in Ethiopia after the 1984-1985 famine, women who lost every single one of their children to starvation. One woman who had 11 children, all of them died in her arms, and she was somehow still alive. I've had the privilege and opportunity of being with some of the most courageous people on this planet, whose names you wouldn't know, but who inspire me to this day standing here, for what they've given and what they've committed to and what they've done with their lives. And I've also had the privilege of working with people whose names you do know, like Mother Teresa. I found myself in India working on ending world hunger with the Hunger Project. And at one point I said to an Indian friend, Indira Koitra, you know, when I was a little girl growing up, Mother Teresa was such a huge hero for me. Now I'm in India and I'm working on hunger. Maybe I could meet her. And Indira said, oh, I know Mother Teresa. I said, you do? Yes, I know Mother Teresa. I can introduce you. Next time you're in Delhi, let me know, and we'll have a meeting with Mother Teresa. And my heart started pounding. I thought I was going to faint. I was so excited. So the next time I came to India, I called her, and sure enough, Mother Teresa was there. She was available, and I had my first meeting with her. And that was another one of those meetings, like the Bob Chapman meeting, where it was you can imagine, life-altering experience just to think that I maybe could be in her presence, and then actually kneeling at her feet, sitting with her, exchanging stories, becoming someone who studied with her, who worked with her, who spent time with her, to realize that the vicious cycle of wealth is as painful and intractable for some people and as hard to get out of as the vicious cycle of poverty, and to have compassion for everyone, no matter what their circumstances. And so that ended up being one of the great privileges of my life. I never could have planned that. I couldn't have, said, okay, how can I plan my life so that I end up in India working with Mother Teresa? No, it came out of this commitment, a commitment to live my life in a way that my highest commitments were what governed every day, what wakes me up in the morning, what tells me what to wear, which tells me which meetings to go to, who's on the agenda for today, is a function of my commitment, not my desires. And that sounds kind of yucky, but I'll tell you, it's actually liberating. And so out of that context of living what I'm calling a committed life, I've had the privilege of working with Archbishop Desmond Tutu side by side in South Africa. I was at Mandela's inauguration. I was in South Africa the last day of apartheid and the first day of the freedom. I sat watching Nelson Mandela take the oath of office. I'll never forget it. I saw F.W. de Klerk step aside from the podium and have Mandela step forward. I watched as Mandela, in the lunch after the inauguration, which was a luncheon it was a big luncheon. There were 5,000 people at lunch. We were outside on a lawn, outside of the Pretoria Stadium after the inauguration was complete. And Mandela sat at the head table with Prince Philip on his right. This is 1994, is that right? 1996. Maybe it was 1994, but whenever it was, Prince Philip was on his right. Benazir Bhutto from Pakistan was on his left. And then every other person at the head table, Al Gore, who was vice president at the time, was somebody super, super important. Yasser Arafat was there. Fidel Castro was there. And I was lucky enough at that time to be at one of the tables pretty far away from the head table, but we could see the head table on television monitors, which they had around. And they had string quartets, and they had white tablecloths, and this vast lawn of green had all these important people. And I was lucky enough to be with the Rockefeller family, who had put up untold millions to end apartheid, and they were honored there. And there was a point at the lunch after this fabulous inauguration that was just a spectacular event when Mandela clanked his glass at the head table. Now we were pretty far away, but it was on the monitor. We could hear him clanking his glass, and he stood up. And he asked Prince Philip to move his chair over a little bit like this, and then asked one of the waiters to bring another chair. And then he asked Ben Zarbuto to move her chair over a little bit, and then he asked the waiter to bring another chair. And then he said to everybody, I want to introduce everybody here to two people. And he brought up two very large, paunchy, kind of overweight, older gentlemen with kind of ruddy complexions. They were very definitely Afrikaners. And they were gruff-looking, a little scary-looking, kind of big macho guys. And he said, I want you to meet my jailers. I spent more time with these two men than anyone in my whole life. And for 27 years, I was either in solitary confinement, hard labor, or torture and interrogation. And they were closer to me than anyone that I've ever known or ever knew since. And in the 17th year of my imprisonment, I realized that I might be there for the rest of my life on Robben Island in the care of these two men. And I decided that I would spend the next year, the 17th year of my imprisonment, to understand their hatred for me and my people, to really understand it, and to find a way to love them anyway. I would spend the entire year to understand that they had a beating heart, that there was something in there that did care, and understand what could generate the kind of hatred and vitriolic way of thinking that they had for my people. And at the end of that year, I did love them. I saw who they were. I saw how much they suffered from their hardened hearts. I saw how painful it is to actually be the oppressor. I had compassion, as much compassion for the oppressor as I had for the oppressed. And I saw that both of us are victims of something we don't understand. And so in the 18th year of my imprisonment, I took back the leadership of the movement from prison because I knew that our movement wouldn't succeed if we tried to only free the oppressed, that we had to also free the oppressor. And so he said that, and then he turned to them and he had them stand in front of him like this. And he said to them, I want to ask for your forgiveness for the 17 years that I hated you. I want you to forgive me for the pettiness with which we lived together during those years. And these two guys were not the kind of people who cry. They weren't like me, but tears were streaming down their faces. And they forgave him. And then they asked him to forgive them for their hatred of him and his people. Then they embraced. By now everybody's crying, not just me. Everybody, 5,000 people are crying. And then he turned to all of us and he said, on this forgiveness, we will build a new nation. And that was the beginning of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, didn't happen for 2 years, but that moment was an act of leadership so exquisite, so authentic, so courageous, so profound that I will never forget it, and I hope you never will. To me, that's leadership. Leadership has such a depth in it of the power of authenticity. When we're authentically telling the truth about who we are, when we're authentically letting go of the blocks and barriers to our own greatness, and we do it in a transparent way, when we are willing to be courageous enough to be someone who leads by example, not just by our words. That, to me, is true, courageous, beautiful, brilliant leadership. And as you know, Mandela only wanted to be president for 4 years. He wouldn't take a second term. He felt that his stand for the end of apartheid and the fair treatment of all human beings was where he wanted to lead from, not from a position. I want to make a distinction between a stand and a position. The position of president for him was a constriction. What he wanted to be seen for is what he stood for, not the position of authority that he was given. He wanted to be seen and known for that the authority from which he led was not from the position assigned to him, but from the stand he took. Archimedes said 2,000 years ago, "Give me a place to stand, and I'll move the world." And you can, and you do. So leadership for me is a stand you take. It's a stand you take to live in a way that inspires other people, that respects other people, that allows other people to feel and actually be seen, heard, and known for the best of who they are, and a commitment to bow in service to whatever is your dharma, your gifts that will be of use to other people and the rest of the world and future generations. And so Mandela for me is a beautiful example of that leadership. Obviously, Mother Teresa is a beautiful example of that leadership. I do want to say that along the way, life gives you the circumstances you need to be the person you need to be, I think. And if you see it that way, even a tragedy, the death of a child, a divorce, a terrible financial crisis, all of it becomes the opportunity for a teaching moment, opportunity to be something that you didn't know you could be, and gets you in over your head. And when you're in over your head and you're committed to make the kind of difference that yours to make, your leadership skills are there, waiting for your attention and intention. They're not something you need to acquire. They're already there, ready to be awakened.
Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.